I have no extraordinary items, so now we move to item 8, which is a presentation from Eden Park Trust Board. If you remember, they are now partially funded by the Auckland Council, and we had a resolution that they come back and update the Finance and Performance Committee on their progress and performance and financial projections. So with us online, I believe we have the Chairman, Doug Mackay, the Chief Executive Officer, Nick Saunter, the Chief Financial Officer, Brett Winstanley, and the Communications Manager, Greta Lawson. Is that correct, gentlemen and Greta?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you and welcome. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, and morena, kia ora koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Could I just make sure everyone does understand who I've got with me? Doug Mackay here, the Chair, Brett, our CFO, and Nick, our CEO. It was interesting just to listen to the local board input, and it's a reminder of my previous time in the council, and it's caused me to reflect that I think we must be approaching the 10-year anniversary of the establishment of the Auckland Council.
That's correct, Doug, next month.
October 2010, and I just want to acknowledge all of the councillors, the mayor, the members and the staff for the incredible amount of work you've done to stand up the council and to deliver all of what you have done for Auckland in the last decade. So thank you. I was interested to hear Margie's problem with a location for the local board in Albert Eden, and I'd just like to put the offer out there that Eden Park has plenty of space, and I will not want to see the local board homeless.
We're hearing you, Doug. Thank you.
We're smack in the middle of the rohi, so if we can help, we would love to try. Thank you. This has been the most challenging of times, and as I know it has been equally for the council, and we are so appreciative. I can't tell you how much we appreciate now, even more than we did at the time, the support you gave us last year. We have just coped with COVID, but it's like riding a roller coaster right now. We've had cancelled games and no rugby championship in recent times, which has been very disappointing. But on the upside, Aotea Rugby was fantastic and was a great fillip for the community, actually, in the depths of the COVID-19 challenges. We've also participated since we last saw you in the CCO review, and we expect next year that we will participate again in the deliberations around stadiums. The format today is very brief. We're here to report, as we are required to do, on the financial status of the park. And Brett will update on a few slides of financials, and then Nick will update on one page of COVID-19 impacts on the trust. And there are some additional slides on various initiatives at the park should you wish to talk about anything more. So what I'll do now is hand over to Brett, who will take you through the financials of the last period.
Kia ora, morena everybody. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this table briefly summarises the 9 months to the 31st of July 2020. When we last presented in March, we presented the previous year's actuals and the full year budget for financial year 2020. We are tracking below budget, perhaps not surprisingly, by around about $715,000 at the operating profit level. At the time of our presentation in March, we were tracking slightly ahead, and all of our events were performing well for us. But unfortunately, we have been in lockdown for 2 months through April and May, and then again partial lockdown in August, which has obviously impacted on that result. Our net interest cost is slightly below budget. We were able to reduce the level of our loan balances slightly more than we had budgeted through the early months of the year, and that has left us at a net profit before depreciation figure of $1,923,000 for the year to date, which is $642,000 below budget. So I would just point out that we are compliant with our loan covenant ratio at the 31st of July. Our ratio is 1.62 to 1 and the compliance level is 1 to 1. Could I have the next slide, please? This table summarises the position with respect to the grant funding for capital projects from Council. So we have now tipped over into the second year, the first year being the July 2019 to June 2020 period. In that period of time, we accessed funding of $1,993,000, and in the period to July, again, we've accessed a further $441,000. So we've accessed a grand total of $2,434,000. Those funds were principally funding projects including an upgrade of our Venue Operations Control Centre. That's the place from which all of the match management is managed on game day. It's where the emergency services, the police, fire, ambulance, as well as the venue hirers and our own staff congregate and manage the match. So it's an important piece of work that we upgraded the facilities within that centre. We've also made significant upgrades to emergency lighting within Eden Park in order to ensure that we maintain compliance with our building warrant of fitness needs, and obviously that's a key safety feature. We've had contributions towards the important project to replace the number 1 turf, which will be concluded in early 2021, and contributions towards replacement of our failing video replay screens. Could I have the next slide, please? This table summarises the key milestones with respect to the council loan. The council loan began on the 30th of September 2019, and the balance at that point in time, $46,545,000. The balance, as reported in your Treasury report at 30th of April, $44,500,000, and at the 31st of August, $45 million. Now, we did manage to pay that loan balance down as at the 29th of February to $43.3 million, but partly through seasonal cash flows, but particularly through COVID. We borrowed $500,000 per month through April and May, which increased the balances back up to the figure where they sit today. Could we have the next slide, please?
Thank you, Brett. Morena, councillors, and thank you for your time. I'll just briefly touch on some of the initiatives we undertook as a result of our response to COVID-19. The team met immediately when the first lockdown was notified, and we implemented a weeks, months and years strategy. That strategy included looking at each role within the organisation and assessing whether or not those roles could be reduced, whether it be through partial hibernation, noting our event calendar coming out the other side, we had a theme of emerging stronger. That saw us achieve a 35% reduction in our wages, and we also saw trustees reduce their fees to zero for the 3-month period. We kept strong communication through our memberships, our partners, our stakeholders and our sponsors, and we've been delighted with the support they've shown us through this challenging time. That's also included significant engagement with the local community, as we know that the local community truly values the contribution that Eden Park makes to their businesses, and in particular the Super Rugby Aotearoa with family-friendly times gave a real kick to those businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector that was significantly impacted by COVID. It has been challenging with the cancellation of international rugby, whether it be the South African fixture and the Wales fixture, or indeed the 2 sell-out fixtures of the Blues versus Crusaders and the North v Souths. We still remain positive that coming out the other side with the 3 Women's World Cups, to Matatini and our Keller events, that we will emerge stronger. We're very grateful for the support that we've received from all our stakeholders, including councillors and Auckland Council. Our function business and non-event day business that has really been a growth and in our utilisation has been seriously impacted. However, a number of those functions have been postponed rather than cancelled. We are looking forward to a sellout fixture on the 18th and hopefully with alert levels going back to level 1, that will see people welcome back to our community and to our venue, and the mental health benefits of sport and entertainment have been very clear, and we do feel that we can play an important part in the rebuilding of not only the economy but also the confidence in the nation. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if we stop there, we'd probably stop for questions, and if people would like more on the following slides, we can talk to those too. So I'm in your hand.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I then would like to open for questions. Do I have questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Darby.
Kia ora, Doug and Nick. Thanks for beaming in. Hey, just on the drawdown, 243432, all up. What's the breakdown, lighting, turf, and other things there?
Kia ora, Councillor Darby. The loading there is turf. It is 860,000. The screen, beg your pardon, I'm just flipping to the right page. The Samsung screen is 1.4 million, 880,000 for the turf. The facilities upgrades in total 418,000 in the first year and another 60,000 this year, so all up around 470.
Sorry, I didn't quite get it. You said for the Samsung screen, what was it?
1.4.
1.4. Okay. Okay. So do these project expenditures, do they reconcile entirely with the development funding agreement?
Yes.
The overall funding, they reconcile with the overall funding agreement. So we have spoken with Council with respect to the projects that we intended to fund, and as things change, we've added flexibility into the numbers.
I'm looking at Schedule 1 of the works plan of the development funding agreement. I'm looking for where the video screen is. Whereabouts in that development funding agreement is?
Do you have it in front of you?
I don't have it in front of me. No, Councillor Darby, there was. This project has been discussed with council officers, and we talked about flexibility as our needs change. Projects that we estimated the costs for prior to the minuting of the agreement have changed, and so there's been substitution and replacement.
All within the existing envelope.
Okay,
Precisely.
yeah. Look, we'll probably need to take that up with our finance side here to understand the relevance of having a scheduled and then the scheduled being suddenly amended. So just in terms of the video screen, in your presentation of 19th of March last year, you actually came to us and you gave an indicative work program, and in your summary, you said, and you specifically stated that you called it the minimum capital program, excluded the video screen. How did it change from being non-essential to essential? So you actually said a year and a bit ago it was in your minimum capital program, it was non-essential, and now
Councillor Darby, Councillor
Now it's
Darby, I can
essential.
intervene if you like. In relation to the asset management plan over the 10-year period, Eden Park Trust submitted to the council a 10-year asset management plan with a variety of projects. Now, as you can imagine, those projects, depending upon requirements, are fluid. And this was a project that was communicated to the council officers and included in the work schedule. Those remain fluid, but are essential works to ensure the venue remains state-of-the-art and represents Auckland and New Zealand with the international calendar events coming through over the next 3 years.
Okay, look, Nick, that's probably, I appreciate that, and that's something for me and others to check in with our finance team. So what approach did you make to government? I'm going back to that, your submission, and it was reported on 19th of March, that these exclusions of video screens, CCTV upgrade, replacement field lighting, changing room upgrades would be likely subject of applications to the government ahead of the Women's Rugby World Cup. What success or otherwise have you had in your applications to government for funding of those projects?
We've had conversations only this week with Auckland Council representatives at AT and also Sport New Zealand around what the funding will be available for venues across the country, whether that be for gender-appropriate bathrooms, technology upgrades, security requirements. So in order for Auckland and New Zealand to win the FIFA Women's World Cup, the Rugby World Cup 2021 and the ICC Women's World Cup, there are standard requirements by the central organisation, so in the example of FIFA. So we've put in a submission as to the projects that we'd like to be considered. At this stage, there has been, other than a small amount of funding allocated for gender-appropriate bathrooms, there's been no other confirmation of funding for those other projects. But we're very hopeful that there will be a contribution from central government in line with the expectation around those events.
Thanks, Nick. Good luck with those negotiations. So, Chair, we've just lost our Chief of Finance.
No, we have others online, actually. We have John, I know we've got John Bishop, we've got Lee Redshaw and Sarah Holdham available.
Okay, so maybe when the other questions of the trust, then do we have the opportunity to actually have some
staff,
questions
yep.
of the staff?
We do.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Councillor. We'll now go to part-A question from Councillor Casey. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. My question is actually about the video screen as well. Thanks, Chris, for starting that off. I'm intrigued by, I think it might have been your finance officer who said that flexibility has been added into the numbers. Can you tell me what that actually means?
I'll respond to that first, Councillor Casey, if I can. It doesn't mean that there's flexibility around the envelope or the financial limits of the grant that you gave us. We continue to operate well within that 9.4 million. There needs to be, and it was always understood, there could be a requirement for flexibility on projects timing. When we submitted the original 10-year CapEx asset management plan to council, which from memory now I haven't got in front of me, it was about $80 million, and we prioritised for the first 3 years, which was the subject of the grant, those projects that we felt would be required to be prioritised in that first 3 years. At the time, the video screens were thought we could nurse them through longer beyond the 3-year window, but as it happened at one of the games this year, which one was it, Nick?
The Chiefs fixture.
The Chiefs Blues fixture, the screens broke down and stopped broadcasting right in the middle of the game, just prior to the start-up of the game, actually. So we had to get technicians into the back of the screens, screwdrivers, and get them back to speed. They are very aged technology and they are not reliable anymore. So we had to accelerate the thinking around the screens in the total asset management plan and bring it forward into the 3-year scenario that the grant covered, and that's what we've done. And we've found ways to shift other spending slightly later because they had not proven to be quite so urgent. But this is, you don't know a lot of this with each individual spend or investment item until you get in and you look more closely at the asset. Your asset plan at the time is at a point in time only, and it has some flexibility. But there is no intention to spend more or less than the funds that the council has made available to us.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I've got another couple of questions still on the video. You mentioned it's state of the art, 1.4 million. You mentioned other screens were failing. So is it a screen or screens? And is it 1.4 million or is it 2.8 or is it more than that?
There are 2 screens existing in the park, and one of them broke down at the match that I described, and we are installing a single brand new screen at one end of the park.
So that will replace the 2 that are failing?
Correct.
Okay. Is it a FIFA requirement?
Yes, it is, for them to be able to have their ability to, whether it be look at third umpire decisions, etc. So yes, you do need to have minimum standards, and scoreboards is one of those things. So it's not only a screen, it's also the scoreboard and also the timing as such.
Replay technology for the referees and the umpires as well.
Okay, Councillor Casey.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and tēnā rā koutou katoa to Eden Park and the people on there. Look, I've only got 2 basic questions now. When the decision was made in regards to the loan and the grant, I did ask whether yourselves and RFAL would go into sort of having a corridor around our stadiums and working closer together. So I think the question to you, Nick, is that was there any discussions that did take place prior to August when the CCO review basically ended any discussions? Did anything take place?
Yes, and thank you for your question, Alf. Yes, they did. And Eden Park submitted, I think it was approximately 15 opportunities for synergies between the organisations. That was submitted to both the CEO of the RFA, but also to Jim Doyle, who was managing that project on behalf of the council. I can't recall the exact date of that communication or correspondence, but we did provide those opportunities, but then were advised that with the CCO review that those conversations were to stall until the outcome of that review process. So yeah, we were certainly available and supportive of looking at those synergies. Those included the likes of turf management or venue of best fit for content to be held. There was a number of synergies there.
Thanks, Nick. Look, just through you, Chair, supplementary to that, when were you told that, look, let's stop all negotiations until the CCO review is completed? I'm assuming it may have been at the announcement, but I just want to confirm that there was going to be a review.
I'm not able to give you an exact date today. It wasn't a question that I'm prepared for today, but I can provide an answer through the chair if that's something. And I do think it was actually noted at the previous 6-month review. Yeah, it's in the notes on page 9, or sorry, page 10.
Okay, so it was earlier this year then that you were asked not to sort of continue any negotiations?
As I say, I'd have to get the exact date, Councillor.
Yes, please, Nick. And Desiree, just one more question. Doug, I just the question I have is in regards to the agenda item, and that is number under the executive summary, and it's would be around the grant. Now I know that as to authorise the chief executive to agree a grant to fund capital expenditure of up to 9.8, and that was the minutes from the March 2019. Doug, I heard you say 9.4, so can I just confirm that 9.4 is what you ended up using of the grant, or asking of the possible 9.8?
My mistake, councillor, I'm sorry, it's 9.8.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Your Worship.
Kia ora, Doug and Nick and team. Thank you for your presentation. I've got two questions. The first really is a supplementary to the question asked by Councillor Darby. And I'm just interested to know what particular pools of government funding you've been seeking to draw on. There was some sporting funding several months ago for compensation to sporting bodies because of COVID-19. Have you explored those? And then secondly, I presume your recent discussions have been in regard to the 19 million events fund that the government has given to Auckland and Northland. I think 17 million of that comes to Auckland. Is that what you're looking for, and is it specifically in relation to the FIFA 2023 event?
So, thank you, Mayor Goff. Just to clarify, so we have been in constant communication with the CEO of Sport New Zealand. The government made approximately $7 million available for gender-appropriate bathrooms, and the government has indicated that through Sport New Zealand that there would be approximately $675,000 made available for gender-appropriate bathrooms at Eden Park. So we're delighted that we'll be able to facilitate the upgrades in the change rooms for both men and women, particularly around those 3 Women's World Cups. As far as the event fund, I have had discussions with ATEED around what that fund will be available for, and it does look as like it's more about stimulating events, but we have entered discussions with them on that. The government is also looking to allocate some funds through New Zealand Football around facility upgrades. So there are a number of areas that we'll be looking to work with the codes and the government to be able to deliver those projects. That being said, it has been a little disappointing that the stadiums and venues haven't had funds made available, and I know that through the Industry Association there have been approaches to government to see how, whether it be theatres, Spark Arena or other facilities around the country, are supported through this challenging time.
Mayor Goff, I'd also add, Nick hasn't mentioned it, but we made a very serious application through the government's tourism fund, major tourism
strategic tourism assets protection fund.
Yeah, asset protection fund. People don't normally think of Eden Park as a major tourism activity in Auckland. We are one of the largest tourism attractors in Auckland, as it turns out, and we put a very comprehensive submission together for that, but we were declined. This is the fund that had got a bit of publicity with the money that went to the bungee jump.
AJ Hackett, yeah.
AJ Hackett, you recognise that fund. We put it very professional. We worked with PwC in Wellington, who were collating all that information for the government on that fund, but we missed out. I get the feeling that Auckland wasn't really a high priority for some of that government funding. They were more inclined to be spending it in the regions. and the regional tourism activities. So disappointing for us. I think they believe that an asset like Eden Park will be there in the future and it won't disappear, whereas some of the other assets they're supporting maybe might not be there in the future when tourism comes back. So I'm not sure, but we've tried lots of angles with the government, and we've got some, what I would call modest success.
Thank you. Look, my more substantive question is in relation to the CCO review panel and its recommendations in relation to Stadia and Eden Park Trust Board. And you and I have discussed this very briefly, informally on a number of occasions, but I guess what COVID-19 has highlighted is that you know, it's put huge pressure on you and every other venue, and it highlights the fact that we as a council need to spend our money in providing facilities for Aucklanders without duplication and achieving economies of scale. What I was interested in hearing from you in this particular forum is what options are you considering in relation to that CCO report around better integration of the Eden Park Trust Board and what still currently is the RFA facilities? And from your point of view, what options are on the table, what options are off the table?
Virtually everything is on the table, and I'll tell you what we've been doing for some months now in anticipation of whatever the outcome was. There would be more of a centralised hub to run the major stadiums in Auckland, and as it turns out, that's what the CCO review has recommended. We are fully supportive of the recommendations. Rugby, Auckland Rugby and Auckland Cricket have been working together in a task force to understand how they might relinquish or give up or change some of their arrangements at the park, some of their benefits at the park, and what they would like to work with council on to replace some of the activities that might not occur at the park anymore. So, and what I'm meaning by that, it's not that complicated, but they would be prepared, for example, to exit the outer oval for sporting activities if they had another facility somewhere else in the city to go to, which would allow the outer oval to be considered for other alternative uses to enhance the operation of the major stadium, the major field at Eden Park. So I'm very confident that rugby and cricket are now prepared to be very flexible in their requirements from the park and their ownership or trusteeship of the park. The other is I have talked to Minister Robertson, who appoints 5 trustees to the park, as you know, and briefed him on the recommendations out of the CCO review. And we as a trust would like to be much closer to the council in a governance sense. He would like that too, and he is prepared to work with us both on any legislative changes that might be required to the Eden Park Trust Act to give the council more of an active governance role in Eden Park as we look to combine potentially the big 4 stadiums in Auckland into one operating management entity at some point, which would probably, in my view, be delivered through a joint venture between Eden Park and the council. Those stadiums being Mount Smart Stadium, Eden Park, North Harbour and Western Springs. So there's been a lot of thinking go on, and we also have a vision for Eden Park that we have developed under our own resources as to what Eden Park could look like as a city asset in the future. Because one of the other things that has come out of COVID, in my view, is any prospect of a brand new downtown or waterfront stadium, which would cost up to $2 billion, is out of the question now for the next 10, 15 years, given the impacts COVID has had on the financial situation of the city. And somebody mentioned it actually earlier today, Greg Preston from Glen Eden. You know, when the city rail link opens up, Glen Eden, he said, will be half an hour from the city centre, which means it'll only be 18 minutes from Eden Park. So Eden Park actually with the City Rail link becomes closer to the people in West Auckland and the people in South Auckland than the city centre does. So I think there's a whole lot of moving parts that can be crystallised well in the new dedicated stadium structure that comes out of at the back end of the CCO review. We're not engaging with anyone officially at the moment. They're preoccupied at RFA and AT with putting that merger together. But as they come through that, I would expect that we will engage actively come, say, February next year.
Thank you. Just one quick supplementary, if I may, Madam Chair. Have you engaged with the Warriors at Mount Smart and other or any other codes in terms of multi-use of Eden Park? Because obviously that may be part of trying to find a more cost-effective way of delivering premium facilities to our sporting codes and their audiences.
Well, firstly, Mayor, both Auckland Rugby and Auckland Cricket are fully on board with sharing the facility with other sporting codes. One of the very unfortunate things that happened as a result of COVID was we were not able to play a world first double-header event in May, I think it was, with the Blues playing the Brumbies in Super Rugby and the Warriors playing the Raiders on the same afternoon. We were going to have a double-header and we got locked down, I think, just literally a week before that big double-header, which speaks to the cooperation that we were building with the Warriors at that time. That unfortunately never occurred, and then the Warriors have had to go off to Australia and they've had challenges of their own. So we haven't really engaged since. The other keen, the other code keen to work with us is football. The Phoenix just love playing at Eden Park. They get the biggest crowds in New Zealand when they play at Eden Park, and they've had good results here. So they are another opportunity for multi-use of the facility here alongside rugby and cricket.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you make a good point about CRL. I hadn't thought of that before. Well done. Councillor Newman, your questions, Patai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the team from Eden Park. I had some questions on the financials, but just coming back to the issue of the screen, I've listened carefully to the questions and the discussion. My understanding is that effectively flexibility within the existing funding envelope is a negotiation with the planning and consenting team from council to achieve a state-of-the-art piece of technology that I suspect will be the envy of stadia around the world. So what I'd be quite keen to understand is the dimensions of that screen technology. That's the first question. And secondly, I would imagine that that screen technology, once applied, would provide a further sound buffer effect for residents in Cricket Ave and Corfi Street and Raleigh Street and Walters Road. So can you speak to those two questions first? And I've got some questions for Brett on the financials.
Thank you, Councillor Newman, and you're correct. This will be equal to any screen in the Southern Hemisphere. The dimensions will be 40 metres by 8, and it will give a whole range of fan experiences that we haven't seen previously in this country. In relation to the structure will certainly provide additional sound buffering from the residents in Cricket Avenue and down the eastern end of the venue. It's fair to say a number of those residents are advocates of the park, they're members of the Hood, and they're looking forward to coming in and experiencing it. We're hoping for that screen to be in place by early December and utilised for our summer of cricket.
Thank you. Going back to my note, probably for Brett, my notes on the financials. So looking at the COVID-19 summary page, with the staffing and wage savings you've achieved and the work that you've done, if you have had the 2 sellout fixtures, and if we hadn't faced the postponement around the the AB fixtures, and I would imagine that you would be tracking very close to budget. You might even be slightly up, but you'd at least be tracking very close to budget. Do you have any sense as to where your EBITDA position might be in relation to other stadia in Auckland?
I'm sorry, Councillor Newman, you'd be correct that we would be tracking at least at budget, but I don't have any comparative information.
Okay. Chair, I think I'll leave it there if anyone else has more questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson, Patai from you.
Thanks. This is a question to Nick, and one to the more immediate future, Nick, in terms of the forthcoming cricket season, which hopefully won't see the level of disruption that we've had with rugby. What are the plans for Eden Park and international cricket this year? And I say that, Nick, because we have people no less than our very own Black Caps captain Kane Williamson saying that, you know, Eden Park has the best atmosphere in the world when it comes to 2020 cricket and one-day cricket. Is there any possibility of getting either more internationals or conceivably even attracting other countries or teams in a similar way as has occurred in some of the other codes around the world?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Watson. Now, just in relation to all codes, we've been working diligently with all codes, and you would have seen some media around even looking at the Tyson Fury versus Wilder opportunity for Auckland, New Zealand through a title fight in boxing that unfortunately we weren't able to secure. There's no question that we working with both Auckland Cricket on a domestic calendar of cricket, and then New Zealand Cricket. Only as late as this morning, I had conversations with New Zealand Cricket as to the likelihood of teams coming into the country and our calendar of cricket. I think it's been publicised that the government has been working with the codes around the quarantine requirements, and I'm very confident cricket, netball and rugby will be able to get their teams in, the international teams in particular. Unfortunately, I do think the Warriors and probably the Phoenix, the A-League and the NRL may be different, but certainly the international teams will have success in getting those teams in, and Eden Park is definitely a venue of choice for those teams with our capacity, but also accessibility to the CBD.
And just one final question, Nick, and you're probably, again, the best person to answer that. You know, at the risk of stating the obvious, my impression now is that with any sport, no matter what code, a functioning video screen is more essential now more than ever in terms of refs' calls on the field, replays as far as the audience goes, that probably next to the turf, the actual state of the turf, it's absolutely essential to be competitive and actually to deliver that viewing experience, no matter whether it's rugby, cricket, league or anything. In fact, in some codes, it's actually even more so like cricket. I mean, is that a fair assumption?
Under a warranted fitness for the various codes, a screen would be a requirement that is for a venue to be selected to host fixtures.
Okay, and just one final thing to finish that loop off, and it goes to your comment, Doug. So just on the financials, my understanding is that the budget for the video screen has absolutely no impact on the council grant of 9.8 million, that if something is moved around or comes in, something else obviously goes out or gets deferred. So there's no extra cost. It's a rebalancing of priorities as the case dictates. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor. The best example I can give you is the turf. We were in a position to potentially install the turf, early this year, and now we won't be doing it probably until early next year. With the uncertainty as to the schedule, as things got changed around, we just couldn't lock down a 6 to 8 week window to install the new turf. So we have to have some timing flexibility on the various projects.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Next question, Councillor Walker.
A couple of questions. One first just around COVID. I'm making the assumption that COVID has made some changes necessitated around stadiums. How geared up is Eden Park around responding to COVID, given that we could obviously have various levels in place for some time?
Thank you for the question. In relation to our planning, we acted early. We worked with our codes and sought expert advice internationally and domestically, and we're very confident. And this weekend, by way of an example, we're operating 20 pods of 100 with dedicated entrances and exits, sanitising stations, social distancing, specifically allocated bathrooms and food and beverage outlets. So depending upon the levels will depend upon the overlay, but if we look to the Super Rugby Aotearoa, we were the only venue in the world to be operating at full capacity only a few weeks ago. So we're very prepared. It is uncertain times with COVID, and we need to either step up or step down depending upon the alert levels. I must say that stadiums all around the world cannot be commercially viable until they get back to level 1. It is very difficult with 1,700 people in a stadium of 50,000 to be commercially viable for events.
The other question I've got is around the resource consent. I'm assuming that's in train. This is so that you can have more content. How is that progressing?
Sorry, Councillor, can I just step in there? I just want to make sure the question is accurate. We're not looking to get more content in terms of the number of days we operate the stadium or anything else. It's about trying to give allow us to operate the 6 concerts that is in the existing resource consent. And we've been in process for a year, and we've just had notification from the council as to the Independent Hearings commission that will be run sometime in October.
November, first week
of November, we go live with the independent commissioners. So the community and we will, and our various experts will put up the arguments for and against the up to 6 concerts here at Eden Park. That's the only purpose of the current activity around the resource consent. We're not looking to change anything else.
Understand that. Just one last question. Will this screen enable you to take advantage of e-sport, e-games?
We, as you may have read, we have signed a deal to be the home of esports in Auckland with a facility within our function rooms, but certainly esports is something on our radar, and as sport evolves and entertainment evolves, we'll be looking to look at those types of events.
Would you be the only venue in the country that could cater for that sort of activity, given the size of the screen?
I think that'd probably be a fair assumption.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Final question to Eden Park people before we go to Auckland Council staff is from Councillor Bartley. Patai, from you, please. Councillor Bartley, are you there? No? Well, then I might go to, I've got another question from Member Wilcox. Patai, from you.
Kia ora. Anei nā he ao hou nā nei ki te take o te COVID-19, ka haere atu ki te take o taku kōrero. Ka ki te koutou i wā, hakapiri i ngā paparehi katoa kia whakawhiti i te pūtea, i te mahi, me ngā rauemi ki roto i a koutou.
Doug and Co, hold the line. We're just going to get that translated. Okay, Eden Park people, the pātai from Member Wilcox says, it's a new world now with COVID-19, so I'll come straight to the point. Could you see a need for yourselves to take control of all the RFA stadiums to cross-subsidise, rationalise and share resources?
I wouldn't use the phrase take control. We have indicated our willingness and, in fact, desire to engage with the new CCO once it's formed to work to a more efficient and strategic operation of the major stadium network across Auckland. The 4 stadiums I mentioned earlier, we would definitely want to be involved in the governance and the leadership and the capturing of the various synergies, productivities, better utilisation of all of the facilities and decisions about the future investment or not in those facilities. So we hope we will play a part in that overall conversation early in the new year.
Aroha ki te whakatoi au I te rawa.
Kia ora, he says he was being cheeky. Councillor Bartley, I think we have you now. Councillor? You're unmuted, Councillor. Are you still there? Okay, look, we'll hold that question, Councillor. And councillors, do you have a question for Auckland Council staff? We have them online. Councillor Darby, did you have a question for staff?
So we've concluded with the Eden Park Trust Board. Yeah, I will. I'm sure you will thank them at the end there. Just
So I want them to hear what you're saying, though.
yeah,
so
that's good. For the Chief Financial Officer, the development funding agreement. I've read that agreement, and the agreement was arrived at after being informed by.
Hold on, Councillor Darby. Eden Park people, can you make sure you are muted, please?
Waiheke loves you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor.
Just in terms of the development funding agreement, it was informed by everything that came before us on the 19th of March, I think it was, last year. And there was an outline of the capital expenditure program, and then that informs the development funding agreement, and that was finalised, and there are signatures to that. It's quite a comprehensive document, but Schedule 1 identifies the capital program. Now, can you reconcile the fact that there is no video screen identified in that development funding agreement of one, and we're being told today it's 1.4 million. That's a big, chunky, obvious item. Yet in the information of 19th of March, it's very clear that a video screen is an exclusion. If you look at the narrative under paragraph 43. Now, I know you don't have that in front of you now. So that's my first question. We've heard today that this development funding agreement Schedule 1 is fluid, it is flexible. That is, projects that aren't identified on it can suddenly appear. And I'm a little bit troubled by that, and who might be allowing this fluidity and flexibility on our side to ensure that the integrity of the agreement is upheld.
If I can start the response there through the chair, and Lee Redshaw may want to jump in here as well. Look, no, it's been discussed here already, and that was the notion of that fluidity. The Eden Park Trust has an overall capital works program. There was various items on there, including the screen, that didn't flow through into the agreement, but here at council, including myself, gave authority for some variation to move there, to actually introduce some flexibility to actually meet the needs at the time, allowing for the fact that COVID restricted some of the capital works to proceed. So council, and it was officer level, did actually support the notion of introducing that flexibility to enable them to actually proceed, utilise the grants up to the amount approved, and that included a part of the screen becoming part of that costs due to the arrangements they had to bring it in from overseas.
Are you satisfied that that move on our part is entirely consistent with the development funding agreement as it is written?
Oh, yeah, as of today, here and now, I'd have to actually go back to the agreement and look at it. At the time, which was from memory at the very beginning of April, I looked at that, had some conversations with the relevant staffs, and it made sense. Here and now, today, I'd have to actually refresh my memory whether there's any concern now through that agreement. But it didn't. I was comfortable at the time. Yes.
Okay. Just going to the other question I have, and it's beyond that, and I do think we need a bit of daylight on what happened there, because it is a significant number of 1.4, and it was not listed, and it was specifically identified as excluded under paragraph 43 of the report that we received 19th of March, I think it was. Just going to the other part, and that is the loan facility and the covenant. And so Eden Park has been in breach of the covenant, and there's been discussions on that, and now there's a request that waiver be extended until end of October 21. Now, I understand we're in totally different times, and I understand the predicament Eden Park is in. We're all in similar predicaments. Can you just outline to us, are there any risks for us in waiving that covenant? What are the risks to Auckland Council?
Yeah, look, what I may do is get John Bishop to elaborate on the detail underneath that. Are you there, John?
Yes, I'm there, Kevin.
Cool.
So the question is, what are the risks to us of extending the waiver? Look, I think it's like a risk with any loan, is that we don't get repaid and the entity defaults. But I would point out that the granting of waivers, in the current COVID situation is commonplace with what's going on in business at the moment. Use the obvious example of Auckland Airport getting waivers from their bankers. So, look, it is commonplace in the current environment to give waivers under these very strange situations.
Okay, so if the entity defaulted, what would put the entity in a position where it defaults, whether it just can't trade anymore? Just give us an idea. I mean, there's a lot at stake here. There's a big chunk of public money.
You still there, John?
Through you, Chair. Look, the simple answer is, what causes an entity to default is, not having sufficient revenues to cover their costs.
Yep. Look, I understand that. It's pretty basic, and I appreciate you being clear in your outline there. And so, taking all that into account, we can see the forecast, the projections for Eden Park, and you're not at this stage concerned about the entity defaulting, John?
I'll look through you, Chair. I mean, all entities are in a similar situation to Eden Park, who operate in this sort of situation right now. Yes, there is increased risk of default, given their revenue is compromised, as are a whole range of entities in New Zealand and around the world at the moment. But Eden Park are still paying their interest, and they're still well within their loan facility.
Okay, look, I'll leave it there, and I do note that they've paid down a few $100,000, I think, in the last year on that loan facility. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, John. Next question, Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm just a little bit confused where we're going here. I think I understand the questions that Councillor Darby, well, I can hear the questions Councillor Darby is asking, but it sounds like there's a concern around the screen because it might have been a nice to have, or it wasn't included in the schedule, but I hear it is included in the schedule. So I guess what I'm asking is around that flexibility, around how they are using the money, which I would suggest is going to change as many funding agreements are changing under COVID and prioritisations, and in this instance, a screen breaking and needed to be fixed and replaced. That must be the decisions that Eden Park can make within the funding envelope that they have. I'm just a little concerned that Councillor Darby might not have the confidence that they are solid decision makers in this space in terms of their priorities. So the flexibility is the question.
Yes, so I mean, they do talk to each other, remember? Yeah. Eden Park does talk to council staff, so internally.
And you have delegations as well that you can approve some changes within the funding envelope.
Yep, so there's been two aspects discussed today. One's the waiver and one's actually the funding agreement. So look, we'll come back to precise details, exactly what the wording does state. My understanding is not an actual exclusion for the screen. What it was saying was that there was that the screen was at that stage identified to be funded from a different source. So we'll actually pull out the exact wording that we had between the December schedules and the March agreement that was actually signed. We'll give the exact details there, but yeah, as you said, Councillor Dalton, staff do have certain delegated authorities under Eden Park Trust arrangements. We exercise those in some cases. But I can understand Councillor Darby's concerns about just the process that was followed at the time. So we'll give a precise explanation of that process and the delegations we used. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next party, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it just follows on from Councillor Dalton. And I certainly appreciate scrutiny over public monies that are going and what they're being used for. I think that's to be commended. But when I look at paragraph 43 that was referred to in that 19th of March report, my reading of it is slightly different than the one what we've heard thus far, and I've got it here in front of me. And it certainly mentions the exclusion of other planned non-essential items that may improve visitor experience. Non-essential. I think the video screen we've heard today is very much essential. It also excludes improvements that the Eden Park Trust will have the opportunity to apply to the government for funding support, such as sports. Well, I guess applications for funding is only good if you get funding for them. If you don't get funding for them, well, then all you've got is an application to show for your effort. So I would have thought that was self-evident. And it does mention at the end of it, such items may include video replay screens, replacement of field lighting, CCTV upgrades. So again, there's a conditional verb there, may, and not will include. And I would suggest that they've been chosen as an example. We've heard today that in fact the video is essential. For that matter, replacement of field lighting, I would thought would be rather important too. If you're playing a night game and you haven't got any lights on, that would be rather important if you hadn't the budget for that. So I would say that those examples there perhaps weren't perhaps the best choice, and I think that certainly that paragraph 43 qualifies that and essentially backs up the flexibility that that Mr. Ramsey was referring to at the outset in respect of the development agreement as a whole. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bartley's retracted her question. So final question, Councillor Casey, before I go to comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I'll just continue the dialogue that's been ongoing through most of the morning, and that's with regard to the video screen costing 1.4 million. Here's the thing for me. We're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic and we're looking at nickels and dimes, and what I don't know to be honest, is whether this is a gold-plated video screen. The CEO of Eden Park says that there is a requirement by FIFA. So, but is that requirement for this 1.4 million screen, or is it a requirement to have a screen that could cost way less than that? So, because I don't have any oversight at all over that decision, I still don't know the answer to that, and that's the issue. I don't need a response. That's what happens when we are presented with one list, and it turns out it may be flexibility, but that's what happens to me. I wonder. I heard statements like, "This is the only one in the Southern Hemisphere. It's going to vastly improve the visitor experience." That doesn't sound right to me in this current climate. It just doesn't sound right. I'll leave it at that.
Look, Councillor, I think we will leave that because it's a matter of really the decision that's been made between Eden Park and in conjunction with staff, and they've come to a conclusion and they've done it. So I think one of the advantages of having a 6-month catch-up is we can have more kōrero around that. I've got one more question from Councillor Darby.
Yeah, look, it was just Councillor Dalton said the screen was on the schedule. From your mouth, I'm reading the scheduled. I can't see it. Was a 1.4 million Samsung screen, or any screen, on the scheduled, either Schedule 1 or Schedule 5, I think it is.
Yeah, look, I haven't got it in front of me from memory. No, it wasn't on that schedule, but it was within the asset management planning requirements that Eden Park Trust had for the development of Eden Park. Yeah.
And the schedule, it's listed as specific terms, but the staff have negotiated outside of the schedule. So it's not on the schedule, but the staff have seen fit, taking good information into account.
Yes, yep,
Okay,
yep,
let's leave
exactly.
it there.
Utilising the
I think
grant made available
we've
to them,
canvassed it
the best outcomes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now we go into kōrero koa, and we have 2 comments, first from Councillor Cooper and then from Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my comment is that we have, I think when senior staff, they use their discretion, they do often take into account the contentiousness of a decision. And we all know, and the whole world knows, because it was highly publicised at the time, that this was a very contentious decision to grant this as a grant rather than a loan, this money to Eden Park. And so for me, I'm very much looking forward to the review of that decision made under assumed delegation, because I believe that it does go outside, but I'd really like the CEO to look at that. This doesn't sit well with me when it's not on the schedule, it's in some asset plan somewhere. This is a lot of money and it was a contentious issue. So I would request that the CEO review this decision. Can't take the money back, and it may well have been, if it had come to us, it may well have come to exactly the same outcome. I just think this is a bit of a gobsmacking thing to find out now. I would have much rather had an opportunity to ask these questions and make the decision ourselves. I'm really disappointed because normally if something's very contentious and highly politically charged, it comes back to us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to acknowledge the Eden Park Trust Board team and look from my perspective, and I think, Chair, you've covered a lot around some of the issues I had. But look, I am quite comfortable in regards to the accountability and the process that was followed and the questions that have been put to the CFO at Council and also the Eden Park Trust Board. Chair, for me, was quite heartened to hear Doug say that the conversations that they did start somehow finished and now are going to continue after the the entity RFAL is formed in December. I look forward to the conversations that they will be having. My other comment is I know a price very similar to that that relates to the video screen is of a similar price to that was put into Mount Smart. If that's the case, apart from the process and looking forward to what comes out of that, I look forward to that screen if it's the same price or similar price to all. So Chair, obviously support B that's been put in there, and just look forward to getting back information around the process, etc. So thank you, and also thank you to the Eden Park Trust Board.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Dalton.
Kia ora, thank you. Look, I just want to thank the Eden Park Trust Board for their presentation today. I'd like to congratulate you on your community outreach as well and your community engagement. And I think one thing that's quite important to some councillors around the table is what that might look like as a return on investment, because your engagement and outreach probably is worth more than $1.4 million paid for a screen. There's more to it than this. There's more than the economics of it. In terms of the screen, I think that well, I know I'm really comfortable with the process. I have complete trust in our finance team. And from what I'm hearing, there was a need to replace the screen, and it is a critical part of your operation, no doubt about it. It's needed. Doug, thank you for the update on the CCO review recommendations, and I really like the energy and the vision, because we need to do things a lot differently than to what we've ever done them in the past, and that is for Auckland Inc. And we need our stadiums to all be working in conjunction. We're a small city in the grand scale of things in the world stage, and I really look forward to how we can continue to collaborate and make this work for Auckland in the stadium space. So thank you very much for your presentation today.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Councillor Walker.
Cool. I'd just like to add my commendations to those of Angela. And when I look at your report, I see across what you're doing for the community, what you're doing around environment, sustainability, zero carbon, is exemplary. So you're leading in New Zealand, perhaps in Australasia. So I really commend you for that, and I just wish that we applied this kind of approach to our stadiums and our venues, because frankly, Eden Park is where it's at. They're part of the heart and soul of this country, and they will be a venue that will lead us out of COVID. So I take my hat off to you. As far as the screen is concerned, the crucial question that I ask is it going to make the stadium better? Is it going to drive more content? Is it going to assist your revenue, your advertising and the like? And I don't doubt that the business case for that would come up very positive. So for me, it ticks the boxes. I don't have any issues, and I commend the staff on having some flexibility. If anything, we know that COVID and post-COVID, if there's one thing we need, it's flexibility. If we have an opportunity to get behind a winner, which I appreciate as Eden Park, then let's do it. So thank you very much. A very good presentation.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Councillor Newman.
Nick, I had one final question of you, belatedly through you, Chair, if I may. Nick, do you have any idea how many COVID-19 tests were undertaken at the CBAC based at Eden Park?
Thanks for your question. The maximum per day available was 400. We operated for 30 days, and most days we were pushing up to that figure, particularly if there was an announcement around a subcluster or cluster. We saw those vehicles come in large volumes through the bus parking bay and hub.
Yeah, well, look, Councillor Dalton's addressed the community outreach, but I think the speed and the determination that Eden Park showed to try and provide the CBAC testing at your location to take pressure off the local road network and to try and alleviate that traffic chaos. More power to your elbow. I hope that we don't have to go back to that situation again, but I would assume that if we did, that we would have support from Eden Park to provide similar in future. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendations that are on screen, but in doing so, I chose not to ask a question because the Mayor had followed up on a question I wanted to put to Doug, and that was on the opportunities that we were working with central government on understanding the tourism dimensions to Eden Park. And secondly, the comments that were made in and around the great opportunities that the CCO review provide us with the merger of RFA and ATEED. And I'm really looking forward to the work that we can do going forward once that merger has taken place in a governance sense and ensuring that there are the right accountabilities to sit comfortably there. I'm tremendously excited about where Eden Park are moving. I think they do create so many opportunities for us in Auckland, and we are really blessed to have this facility right in the heart of the community. And I have long believed that once the CRL station opens, it is absolutely going to change the whole dynamic, not just for Eden Park, but the area generally. And Eden Park is very well placed to be able to play its part in the growth of Auckland going forward. So I think these 6-month catch-ups are invaluable, and I'm pleased that you're ensuring that we actually have the next one scheduled at least before the end of April. But I'd like to pass on my congratulations to the board. I was going to comment, and it's been picked up by my colleague, but just how pivotal you are when something like COVID occurs, the fact that people know where Eden Park is, that they can go and have their COVID tests, that you have a wonderful way, whether it's the tangi or of some well-known Aucklander, or whether it's, whatever the event might be that is critical, Eden Park will open the doors and encourage the community. And so these are exciting times moving forward, and I'd just like to congratulate the board, thank them for all the work that they're doing, and our officers in Auckland Council, the financial officers, who have been working closely with them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And are you happy with the second recommendation I put up on the screen as Chair's recommendation? If you're moving?
Yes, I was happy. That's why I spoke to, the fact that it's great having these catch-ups, and I hope that we can ensure that we do it before April 2021.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Mulholland.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to talk, and I'd like to thank the representatives of the Eden Park Trust Board. My comment, and I didn't have questions, I've listened very carefully, I've also read information, I follow on social media, and as we know, this is my first term, so I've had a look at the history and understand what has been said with regards to some of the controversy. I would like to just share that for me, listening to what has been shared today, I'm very proud of the work that the Eden Park Trust Board undertake, and I want to especially thank not only Nick and the staff, but all of the people that work in the space and the environment to help make Tamaki Makaurau a fabulous and outstanding place to live. I particularly would like to comment too, I think it's just standard operating practice in business to have something like the screen. And whilst I agree with some of the discussion around decision making, and I want to acknowledge Councillor Darby's questions on those, so I'm looking forward to just some feedback on that, but I think it's certainly SOP. So, and I welcome the integration of any potential future change that might occur with regards to RFA and other facilities to better provide a space to our community to have a fully integrated environment. So that means there might be change in the future, and I really look forward to that. I will be a supporter of that for my community, because I also asked my community what do they think, and I had some very positive feedback. With regards to some of your social media and what you do say in public, I just want to acknowledge some fantastic things that I and others observe that you do. Local productions, good on you, because we are in COVID, we know that. And I think you're leading the pack in terms of being able to take us to the next space, because we are in a different environment. And really congratulate you on your positive thinking, and your board for obviously being very forward thinking, because we do need to do business differently. But I want to acknowledge things like your local productions, the local productions that you support, Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand, the testing that has been mentioned by Councillor Fletcher, that you open up this space, and I think it should be opened up. I think it should be better utilised as we move forward, maybe even have a band or so there. So congratulations on your cookie project too, and for supporting children and local community. So thank you to you. It is a really outstanding piece of work that you undertake, and I know you are dedicated to sports and also other activities in the community. Kia ora tātou, and again, thank you very much for your work and for your transparency and what you're sharing, and I look forward to some of the further dialogue in the future.
Kia ora. Look, that takes us to the end of the other councillors' questions. Doug, to you and your team, a huge thank you for your presentation, for being open and transparent with us today. I want to make reference to a couple of things that others haven't, because whilst I share the accolades that you've been given, I want to just touch on a couple of things that I believe have been highlights from my perspective. As trustees, you've reduced your fees to zero for 3 months as a result of the impacts of COVID, and that's to be congratulated. I also want to congratulate you on being able to hold a Super Rugby match with just 6 days' notice, and what a great day that was to see Auckland come out from there under the little mushrooms that we've had to be under, and then come for that rugby match. That was a fantastic day, and congratulate you on the very fast turnaround that you were able to put that together. So congratulations on that. Look, the reason for my second resolution wasn't just to note that you're coming every 6 months, is that the Mayor, bless him, decided that finance and performance would potentially be every second month, but until COVID hit us. So we don't really know what we're going to do next year with regards to value for money and finance and performance. So I put in the resolution that you come back to us by the end of April 2020, which is 2021, which is slightly longer than 6 months, but I'm just not quite sure even now exactly whether we'll have a finance and performance meeting in March, so hence you've got a little extra time. But I agree with my colleagues that the kōrero, the discussion between us, is good. Finance staff tell us the relationship between you is good as well. Congratulations, thank you for the presentation, and we'll see you next year. To that end, though, we have a mover with Councillor Fletcher, and I've seconded it, and we're noting Member Blair, who is, of course, part of the IMSB delegation for the Finance and Performance Committee, that he has a conflict of interest of this item, so he won't be participating in the vote. So I've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Me kihi te hui. Let's take a break for lunch. I've been asked for an early break from Councillor Watson. We'll come back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.